Thinking about why the quality of leaders, places, culture over the hill are so elite, wondering if it was mothering the village that enabled so many rainmakers to emerge. Pause, think about it with intentional thought, and consider where we go from here. Stay tuned and hear what Rosemary Clarice Hanna got to say about what drove the success over the hill.
Something to think about with Dale Happy Knowles. What we think, we become. What we radiate, we attract. What we imagine, we surely can achieve. Let's change the narrative, 242.
242, welcome to Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles. Join our co-sponsors, Dom Dev Enterprises and Paget Investments, and our friends of Something to Think About in this discussion this evening on this timely topic over the hill we're going to be talking about and some of the things to go with that. Post your questions, comments, suggestions. Tell us where you're from, where you at, and what driving you good today. Just let us know you out there, you're living, your blood pressure ain't high, nothing, something. Let us know. So this evening we have this lovely lady with us this evening. Yes, that queen on the screen right now. Miss Rosemary Clarice Hanna, all the way from down so over there, around the corner by the Gamalame tree and the Delhi tree. You got Delhi's over there?
Tree.
The Delhi tree, yeah. Welcome, Miss Hanna. How are you doing?
Thank you. Get happy. I'm very well. Thank you. And it's good to be on this show. I'm happy that you asked me to come on.
I'm glad that you accepted. Because, when you get up in age and you all get so prestigious, you can't book you all. You say your time limited, you're this, you're that. All kind of crazy things you always come up with to say why you can't come on the show. But you have always been very supportive of anything the youthful people do. I say youthful people. Yes. I can't say youth no more because I ain't no hair on my head. But, we can go from there. So, Ms. Hanna, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I know you're a pictorial historian and an author.
Right. Well, people call me an historian. I love history. And I grew up in the heart of Over the Hill, at the corner of Anderson Street and Jail Alley, the area that comes down south of the police barracks, which used to be the prison when I was a child. And our house was right on the corner of Anderson Street and Jail Alley. There were seven children in the family, 5 boys. I was the first girl, and then my sister followed me. And growing up over the hill, it was so much fun for us as children, because all of the mothers in the neighborhood were mothers to all of the children. They were all good friends. And most of the people in my neighborhood, my immediate neighborhood, they were members of St. Agnes Church. So we had that in common too. And we did a lot of things like rambling through the bushes and playing through the bush and doing things like that, which children don't seem to do anymore, Playing hopscotch in the street, playing cricket in the street and things like that, spinning tops, the Lignum Vitae tops. We had so much fun. I never did learn how to skate though, although my sister did, and all of the other children used to skate, and that was great fun for them. I used to watch them from the porch.
Yeah. But you also this what you call a horticulturist, Spice News.
I'm sorry?
Plants and who
yes,
do the plants
but I
and
actually
make the plants look like pictures. You ever see them people when they take pictures of the yard?
I love gardening. In fact, I got that from my mother. We had a lovely garden there. Well, my brother's house is on the property that used to be our garden when we were small. We grew everything there, like your grandparents' property down in Chippingham. Where they had all those lovely trees. I used to love rambling through the grounds there with your cousin Lorraine when we went to Western Junior School together. Okay. And so we grew just about everything, and we didn't buy tea. We had the teas from the garden, sour leaf tea, pear leaf tea, and all sorts of things, guavas. We had everything growing in that yard. And Mother made jams from the cherries, and she made jam from the sour oranges, orange marmalade and stuff like that. She was a very, very good cook. And she was also a wonderful seamstress. She made all of our clothes when we were, even for the boys. She made their suits and everything for them when we were growing up.
There you go. My grandmother was similar. I don't remember for the boys, but she made a lot of dresses
Mhm.
and stuff for people. But when I think of mothering the village of rainmakers over the hill, I think of Lorraine McDonald. You know that lady from the Volunteer Reading Project. She has this comment or statement that
Mhm.
that she put up when she was speaking to the children and the like. And it basically says that the child who is embraced by the village will cultivate
Yes.
the land, right?
Yes.
And that's powerful in there. And so we're gonna build on that comment.
Mhm.
And so when we have to
Very
ask the
good.
question, then who is the village that inspired the youth to cultivate the land?
Well, in my case, like I said, it was all of the mothers in the neighborhood, the mothers and fathers actually. And in those days, most of the women were housewives. They didn't go out to work. There were a few exceptions, like Loren's grandmother, Mrs. McDonald, and Mrs. Rosalie
Okay.
Smith, who were both teachers at Western Senior and Western Junior School,
Mm.
and also
It's
Mrs.
a teacher
Thompson
then.
from
Mm-hmm.
McPherson Street when I was growing up, But generally speaking, all of the wives were homemakers. They stayed at home and they did everything with the children. And one good thing too, I don't know how many people do it now, but when we were growing up, everybody sat around the table to have breakfast and lunch and sometimes supper. But the whole family sat together to eat, and have conversation. I don't know how much of that happens now, but I think that may be missing from the equation today.
In the creation, yeah. Because that's another question I was gonna ask is when is that village most effective? And so you touch on part of it where you talk about the dinner table or the breakfast table or the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm.
Because
It's
in
really
in my life,
home really is the place where it should be started. And of course, like I said, the church. Like most of my neighbors were members of St. Agnes Church. We also had some Methodists. The Archers belonged to the Methodist and Brethren Church, and Mr. and Mrs. Pender, they were Roman Catholics. But everybody was involved with their church, and so life revolved around home and church.
right? And so and then you also had in the community you had businesses, and
Oh
I
yes, oh
believe
yes.
back then
Mhm.
the you still had gangs, but the gangs was only like somebody running up to
No, no,
somebody
no. When I
slapping
when
them
I
or
when
whatever,
I
and
was
that
a
was about
child,
it.
when I was a child, that's 80 years, nearly 80 years. I'm 80 years old now, right?
Yeah, but
But when
you
I was
still look
growing up,
young.
there was no such thing as gangs. There were no gangs.
Yeah,
But
a couple
in the
fellas used to
neighborhood,
get together.
we had our little neighborhood shops. We had Mr. Morris down the road. We also had Mr. Mackey, who had his what we call a department store on Louis Street. We had everything in there. He did had clothes, ice cream, and he made shoes and fixed shoes in his store. And he called it the Stop and Shop, similar to the one on Bay Street. And Mr. Adley had a little store down on the corner of Louis Street, and a few other people in the neighborhood shut shops. The
Was that AF
Coakleys
Adley
had a
or
shop. And so
AF
it,
Adley?
it was a very tight knit neighborhood.
Okay. So we learn through science, at least when they send us to school and teach
Hmm.
us the sciences, they tell us that
Hmm.
mothers have the function to birth the children, to nurture the children, to develop the children to become productive
Hmm.
and caring
Yes.
citizens of society, right? And we always focus on this mind, body, and soul here on this show. And so I suggest that the fathers tend to develop the tangible connections that they
Hmm.
go with the children, having sports and playing with them, and the mothers deal with the intangible connections. And so
Hmm.
when we
Hmm.
look at that, we talk like I say they teach the boys to be gladiators and girls how
Hmm.
a man should love them kind of thing through their example. But the mothers, I mean, we honoring this mothers because Mother's Day, Sunday gone and everything,
Hmm.
and mothers are mothers. Mothers are the cornerstone of our society as
They
far as
certainly
I'm
are.
concerned,
They are. Hmm.
right? And so forth. So when we look at the mothers, it's always said that the mothers are the ones who teach people how to love and how to feel protected
The
and
nurture,
nurture
hmm.
all of that. And they the ones who actually talk to us, right? Because fathers
Yes.
normally don't talk.
Yes.
Hey boy, what you go in the corner, go do this, go that. There's no conversation on the most part.
Well, in my
Yeah.
case, my father was so busy because, with 7 children, he had to work,
Yeah,
he
you
worked
gotta
as a
rest.
printer. And of course, he was a musician. So he's always also busy as a musician, playing privately and in church and all like that. But we had a pretty good life, you know.
That's great. That's great. That's great. Yeah. Okay, so when we look at all of that then, and
Hmm.
so if mothers are teaching people how to explore their feelings and the like,
Hmm.
both
Hmm.
fathers and
Hmm.
mothers are needed in society, but we also have this know that the mother is somebody who
Hmm.
absolutely has to be in place.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
and then we have the good book, the basic instruction before leaving night
Bible, yes. Hmm.
that tells us all kind of good things there. And so when we look at this and we say, what is the what is what is mothers and mothering mean to
Hmm.
you? What would you say?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
What would mother
Hmm.
and mothering mean to you?
Oh, it means a lot because I mean, like I said, mothers are the nurturers of the children, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to talk to your mother about anything, and that is usually the case.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found as a mother personally is that when my daughter was growing up, she had good friends, and I always got made it a point to get to know her friends' parents. I
Okay.
got to know her friends' parents like that, you know. So you
Mm-hmm.
need to connect, and with when you have children, you need to find out who their parents are and who their friends are
Yeah.
to make
Cool.
that you know that you have the same values.
Yeah. And I also learned that when people feel like they're loved and valued, they tend to radiate positive energy and want to
Oh
be
yes.
productive and want to help and stuff like that. And so that's why
Hmm.
I think it's important during those days why people did so much is because the
Hmm.
mothering was there, whether it was your direct mother or somebody else doing it
Hmm.
and cause those things. So how significant then went over the hill to our development?
Over the hill is very significant to our development because that's really the bedrock of change in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going back as far as the Burma Road riots, you know the story about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, in the 60s and the 70s, with the change, with the moving into political parties and all like that, and all of the rallies, political rallies that were held at the Southern Recreation Grounds and the Windsor Park down at Wolf Road, you know, and
Yeah.
that's where people, the over the hill people, were awakened as to what was going
Yeah.
on around them, and they were clamoring for change. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the people, the shakers and makers of the Bahamas, came from over the hill,
Yeah.
from
We
the
can talk
right
about
there
some of that.
in the
Mm-hmm.
over the hill
Mm-hmm.
area. So
Yeah.
Lyndon Pending came from Mason's Addition and East Street, Sir Randall Fox from the Fort Finn Castle and McPherson Street, Mr. McPherson from McPherson Street,
Mm-hmm.
and so many others, you know.
Yeah. So define for everybody out there what was considered over the hill
Well,
for
when
those
when I
persons
was
who might
growing
not
up,
know.
I'm happy. There was nothing south of Wolf Road. Wolf Road
Okay.
was like the end of the world for us. So when I was growing up, over the hill encompassed the area from, as I said, just where we live, just south of the prison,
Vincent.
which is now
Mm-hmm.
the police barracks. And it was bound on the east by Collins Wall and on the west
Okay.
by Nassau Street. And we also
That's a street.
considered Chippingham a part of that too, you know. But as far as Wolf Road was, below Wolf Road was all farmland, and there was no access below there, you know, except through by track roads. In fact, we had a little farm up here in Fox Hill where I live now, and I don't know if you can't believe it, but we used to, the entire family, we used to walk from Anderson Street all the way up here, the entire family, all of us, the boys and the girls. And my little sister was still in the being pushed by her mother.
Mm-hmm.
We walked
Mm-hmm.
down East Street, along Wolf Road, onto Bernard Road, then on to Fox Hill Road. And we did that
Yeah.
quite often. And we would come up here and spend the day, spend the day up here in the farm.
Yeah.
But
Now,
here
when you
again, you
say
know, all of
walk
that
on the
was
road,
part of our bonding with each other, you know. And I remember on our way walking up to Fox, and my brothers would be running in and out of the bushes, getting dillies and all sorts of goodies, you know, for us to
mm-hmm.
eat on the way.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was
that's the
fun.
next reason why people don't be sick back then,
Yeah,
like nowadays be sick.
we
You
used
always
to eat
eat
from the
fruit. Yeah.
yard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that bird and off the tree.
Hmm.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then, those roads
Hmm.
you're talking about walking on, they were
Hmm.
roads back when you're talking about it, or
They
they
were
used to just
railroads. They were,
path,
they were paved roads.
paved roads. Okay, I never
Yeah,
heard that.
East
So, but
Street and Wolf Road and Bernard Road and Foxhill Road.
okay,
Hmm.
so cool. So now when we look at that whole thing,
Hmm.
you define that. So why is it significant then that if that was where NASA was or where Over the Hill was,
Hmm.
when it started to expand, like what year would that have been when it
Oh,
started to
gee.
go beyond that?
I don't know what year, but it was a gradual expansion, you know.
Okay.
At one point they opened up what they call the Grove which is south of Wolf Road.
Well, for right.
I think that was developed
It's
by
Angliston now.
So Mr. Simonet, Roland Simonet, I think that was
Okay.
developed by him. Then you had other subdivisions that grew up that came about. Then Seabreeze came about, and people moved east, west, north, and east, west, and south. Black people moved mostly to the south, the east, and the west because they were still sort of prohibited from having access to property in certain areas. I remember when my brother was looking for a lot on Collins Avenue. He was a big old adult man. He wanted to buy a lot at the top of the hill at Collins Avenue, and the agent told him that that property was reserved for white people. So that was still going on well into the 60s and the 70s, that sort of thing. And of course,
Right.
out in the Grove West, they had it put in their deeds that no one of only Caucasians could have property down there. But I mean, of course, that's changed now, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we still had a lot of restrictions. And when we were growing up, we were happy in our environment. As a child, in some instances we were not aware of what was going on, but as we became adults, then you realize that there were certain places you couldn't go, like we couldn't go to Savoy Theater because it
Right.
reserved for the so-called
Right.
whites. And so we had the Capitol Theater, we had cinema, and then later on we had the Wolf Road Theater opened up, and there was also one down Blue Hill Road, um, there below St. Barnabas Church. I've forgotten the name, but it used to be a church there. But
Okay.
so we just expanded to the south and to the east and to the west. And
Yeah.
even to some areas in the east, we were not welcome. You know, Black people were not welcome, like Blair, Eastern Road, and areas like that. But of course, that has all changed now.
Yes.
We can live
So
anywhere.
yeah, once you get a couple of dollars, you can buy a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Still.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how did mothers build a village? Because I mean, we always talk about this village, and we say we gotta go back to the village. So
Hmm.
and if
Hmm.
the mothers are the cornerstone of those villages, then
Hmm.
how did they actually build it, or how did they keep it together?
Well, like I said, the nurturing thing, and in those days too, um, mothers always made sure that well, they in the schools they taught woodwork and stuff like that for the boys, and
Okay.
we all went. Some girls went to sewing lessons. I didn't have to go because my mother was a seamstress, but I went to knitting classes and things like that. And even when my daughter was a child, I sent her for crochet lessons up on the Fort Hill to Mrs. Burnside and her sister, Mrs. DeVoe, and to do things like that. And like I said, we were all like one big family in our neighborhood. And at St. Agnes Church, they had a group called, this is long before the Anglican Church women came about. They had a group called the St. Agnes Volunteer Group. All of the ladies who belonged to St. Agnes Church, they got together and they did things for the church, and they also involved the children. So we were all involved in doing things for the church together. So that's what was also a part of the nurturing. And of course, Sunday school, Sunday school in church, very, very important.
Yeah. Okay. So Val McInnes is saying, hi Rosie. That's all the way from
Hello,
Canada. That's
Val. How are you?
our number one fan in Canada, right?
I know, it's my good friend. Tell her to tell Gina hello for me.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm.
Awesome. Cool. So when we look at that, then mothers
Mhm.
also, like you said, would predominantly stay at home, but they were very much involved in I would say, civic activities and
Oh yes, very, very much
movements
involved.
and
Some
supporting.
like my mother, for instance, she was involved with the Eastern Stars, and Mary Ingram was her good friend, and she was the one who started the women's suffrage movement. And people always make the mistake and say that Dame Doris Johnson was responsible, but actually it was Mary Mason Ingram who started the suffrage movement in the Bahamas. And what she even had her children and her lord sisters going around to get signatures for people for petitions to present to the House of Assembly. And they did that for long years and they got nowhere. And it wasn't until Doris Johnson came back home, and kudos to her, and they persuaded her, she'd offered to speak on behalf of the women. But guess
Right.
what? They wouldn't allow her to speak in the House of Assembly. So she had to go and speak in the Supreme Court on the Bahamas of the women's suffrage movement. But
Wow.
Mary Ingram was the catalyst of that, and also Mrs. Walker, Mabel Walker, and Eugenie Walker and Enos, Mrs. Enos also, Dr. Enos's wife. They were all involved. Although
Yeah.
those two ladies, they were Americans, but they were very much involved in the suffrage movement in the Bahamas.
Yeah. Yeah. My grandmother was Eastern Star, and she was involved in that
And Mother
underground.
Donaldson.
Yeah.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
your
know that
grandmother and my
those.
mother were good friends in the Eastern Star, and so was
That too.
Val's
Oh,
mother. She
another
was
one.
also an Eastern Star, I think. Yeah, all of them were Eastern Stars.
No, I mean
Prince all Eastern
but I
Stars.
guess back
But guess what? I
then.
never joined the lodge.
Yeah.
I'm
Back
not a
then
lodge
everybody.
person.
Yeah. But you never know. You never know
No,
until you
too late for me now.
you scared of the hottie.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Good. So, what did mothers do then, besides what you already mentioned? Is there anything specific that they would have done? Because if you talk about the women's suffrage movement and suffrage
hmm
movement
hmm
and the like,
Well,
that
my
was a
mother, for
significant
instance,
role, right?
my mother was very involved politically. And she was a member of the Grandstown branch of the PLP when it first started. I think she was the first president of that group. She got me involved in politics, and she also roped her younger sister, Grace Bird, into it. And Grace was very, very active, after mother died, even before mother died. And she was very involved civically and with the YWCA too. Um, and she was active in the YWCA, and she was also the YWCA also had a garden club. She was involved in that too.
Cool. That's awesome. So, folks, you're watching Something to Think About with Dale Happy Knowles, and we're here with the lovely Rosemary Clarice Hanna. You know that lady who sometimes you see at funerals or in church or around the place where there's a major event happening, and you wonder she got a camera in her hand and taking a lot of pictures. When you look at those pictures, and you could go on Facebook page and see plenty of them, you can tell the story as to what is happening in that room just by looking at the expressions on people's faces and just the way she captures pictures. The first time I saw her with that, me and her had a conversation, and I'm sure she don't forget that. But um, that's a part of how we trying to build this nation again. Because we had a village, and we seem to have lost the village, but the village is coming back, and we can touch on some of that also. But don't forget to post your questions now, because we want to hear from you. Because you got plenty knowledge sitting in front of me right now, and we want you to tap into that so that we could get these things on record. And who knows what children is going to be exposed to this to be able to see and experience and understand what really is happening in our country and stuff. So the basic instructions before leaving out, that's the Bible. That's what I refer to it as. It says that strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. You hear that? Does not eat the bread of idleness. Now, plenty grandmas and the like who don't play. Yeah, you ain't gonna be around that place and don't be working. You gotta be doing something.
You know
Right. So
something?
tell us.
We all, when we were growing up, we all had chores to do. Once there was no sleeping late on Saturdays. Everybody had something to do, and we got our little
So,
little change on Saturday afternoons, and we would go up to Mortimer's and get our popcorn and peanuts or snow cones and stuff like that, you know. But you always had something to do. And another thing is that around that area when I was growing up, it was spick and span clean. It was clean, clean, green, and pristine. You may not have had a lawn or anything, but your yard was always clean. Houses all nicely painted and everything. And it really distresses me now when I go into that area where I grew up and I see all the homes that are just rotting, literally falling down and rotting, and the garbage is piled up all over the place. We really need to do better with and appreciate our environment and the beauty that we have in this country, you know. But some people take so many things for granted. I do not understand how some people can just sit around in filth. And that really bothers me, you know?
so my mom Iris Knowles is saying, what about the Mothers Club?
The Mothers Club, I think Mother was a part of the Mothers Club too. I was surprised the other day I saw something that someone was named Mother of the Year by the Mothers Club. I thought they were extinct. So I don't know, you know, who operates it now, you know? You know, they used to have that little building at the top of what we used to call Doghouse Corner, which comes, like I said, just south of the police barracks there.
Yeah.
It's the building is actually attached to the wall of the prison or the police barracks. And at one point that was the Mothers Club building. Initially, when I was a child, that was the house where they used to keep stray dogs. We had no stray dogs running around when I was a child. They had dog catchers. They used to catch the stray dogs and put them in that house. And I remember I used to go to Smith's little preschool on Fort Finn Castle, and sometimes walking to school. I was a little girl, 3, 4. You could walk by yourself in those days, you know. And you would hear the dogs barking in what we call the doghouse corner. That's why they call the street the doghouse corner. Although the official name is Jail Alley, the doghouse corner. And sometimes you'd hear the dogs barking. Other times when you pass by, you have no barking. So that told you that the dogs had been what they call it, euthanized.
Oh,
They
okay.
had they didn't keep the dogs. They got rid of them, you know. But that was all about, and I don't know what happened. They were there. The Mothers Club occupied that building for quite a while. So I don't, but it's just empty and derelict now. It's another derelict place in the neighborhood. So
So
I don't know who's running the Mothers Club or where they're operating from. But I
yeah.
did see recently that someone was made Mother of the Year by the Mothers Club.
Yeah, and those things are important to recognize people also,
Mm-hmm.
and what have you. So when we look at mothers then in the community again, this how do they forge the environment to yield so many freedom fighters? You know, because it's
I'm
one thing
sorry.
to bring people up. How did they forge
Mhm.
that environment to yield so many freedom fighters, so many people who were fighting
But you know,
for
people
equality
just
and the like and everything?
people wanted better for themselves and their children. They wanted better for themselves and their children. And I know that when I was a young woman, um, everybody read the newspapers. We read the editorials, and I would sit and discuss the editorials with my daddy and my mother around the table. And sometimes his daddy's cousin Joe Hanna, Arthur Hanna's father, he used to come. He was a voracious letter writer to the Tribune and most of the newspapers. And he would come and I would sit at the dining room table and listen to them talk, Joe and Daddy talking about life and different things and politics, you know. And then Mother was very involved politically. So, and that was the general thing around in my era, you know, when we were coming up, that they just wanted better for their children. Of course, they stressed that should get a good education because the education was the way to move forward, you know.
So I can call some names now, and I want you
Mhm.
to say something about each one of them.
If I know them.
First, yeah, I think you know this. Edgar Bain.
Edgar Bain, he was very unique. You know, he owned the cat, not the cat and fiddle, the Silver Slipper out
Silver
there
Slipper,
on
okay.
East Street, and he was also a merchant. He had stores. He had a store right there next to the Silver Slipper, and in that store, I think who used to work there, Mrs. Um, Maynard's mother, Clement Maynard's mother, and her
Okay,
sister.
Zoe.
They used to run that
Oh,
shop for
his
Mr.
mother.
Bain.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah,
he
I
was
know.
he was quite a
Zoe is
businessman, you know.
Kamabachi. Oh, sorry.
No,
Okay,
Mrs.
I get mixed up here.
Miss Simonet,
Seminet. Okay, yeah.
Miss Simonet.
Cool. All right. Dr. Cleveland Ines.
Oh, Dr. Enos, he's really good. I think people should read his book, Baintown, and he wrote several books, I think, Baintown and another one. And he was very much involved, and from the heart of Baintown, Meadow Street,
Yeah.
very, very influential gentleman. And like I said, his wife, Finney Eneas, she was an American, but when she came here, she really adopted her Bahamian life, and she taught
Right.
at St. John's College. Another thing, when she and people like Mrs. Walker came from the United States, they had difficulty getting jobs with the Ministry of
The South.
Education because the colonials looked down on American education. They didn't think it was up to par. So Mrs. Eneas taught at St. John's College, and she later became the head at St. Anne's School in Fox Hill. And Mrs. Walker actually was the one who started the Bahamas Teachers Union. And when she started that unit, and she wanted to have meetings at the in one of the government schools, she was denied access to any of the government properties to have union meetings. And she said the
Wow.
first person who really supported her in the union was Carlton Francis, and
Good
it
man.
grew from there.
Yeah, but we can maintain
But
and
they
stuff. But
played a very significant. Those two American ladies, they played a very significant role in the development of the Bahamas.
yeah, and I think because of that is why when I moved from Canada to the States, they didn't accept any of my credits. It wasn't because I couldn't
Hmm.
study or I wasn't smart enough. They
Hmm.
just,
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
it probably
Hmm.
was that I wasn't smart enough. But anyway, but
Yeah, and too,
so.
some of the English, some of the British teachers that we had here, they did, and they discouraged some of us people like us from going to certain fields.
Mm-hmm.
They told them they could be
Yeah,
teachers, but they couldn't be doctors or lawyers or whatever.
lawyers and stuff.
That that was quite prevalent. Hmm.
Maybe that's why so many is pushing for their children still to be doctors and lawyers today. When
Yeah,
I think there's
yeah.
so many more fields that they could be going for.
But unfortunately, that colonial mindset is still very prevalent in many of us. It's
Yeah,
unfortunate, but it's very prevalent among many of us.
yeah. So Andre, Hannah is saying that our mother was named Mother of the Year by the Mothers Club sometime in the 1970s.
I think it was 73. I'm not sure. That's Andrea. Yeah, I think it was
Yeah,
70. I still have the book somewhere here with all the write-ups and everything.
well, the write-ups. Wow.
That
Yeah,
was a big thing in those days. They all used to have a ceremony at the Southern Recreation Grounds to name the Mother of the Year. And they got their sash and everything, to look like, like when the beauty queens get their sashes and bouquets and all that sort of stuff. They had all of that. Yeah, there they are.
yeah.
Mother and daddy on their wedding day and then later on in life. Those two pictures were taken around the time when Andre got married. The
Oh,
bottom,
okay.
the bottom pictures.
The bottom pictures. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. They look very familiar. I
Yes,
never met
yes.
them, but they look familiar.
You should have met them because they were very friendly with your grandfather and grandmother.
Well, probably then. Yeah,
Mm,
more than
yeah.
likely. My mom will sure tell me later. But she can tell me one
Yeah,
more story.
Aris knows the whole story.
Mm-hmm. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah. So Claudius R. Walker.
Oh, Mr. Walker, Dr. Walker, he was one in a million. Let me tell you. I remember when I was doing the interviews for the Over the Hill documentary, and I visited with Juliet at their house in Hospital Lane. And she was telling me how frustrated he used to be because it was just like he was a lone wolf crying in the wilderness when he was in the House of Assembly. And she said sometimes he would come home so angry because he was just he was just like hitting his head up against a brick wall with those Bay Street boys. And also, I remember Arthur Hanna telling me years ago, he said the PLP made a big mistake in hindsight when they did not embrace Dr. Walker because of all that he did for the Bahamas. He was a brilliant man. He was a linguist. He
Wow.
was a tailor. He was a musician. He was a printer. He was a pharmacist and doctor. And he did his own medicines in his, he built a hotel, the Reinhardt Hotel
Right.
himself,
Right.
because Black people couldn't go into any hotels in Nassau. So he built that hotel and for Black people who came to the Bahamas to visit. That's how that
Right.
came about. He
Cool.
was one in a million.
Plenty knowledge and history there.
And of course, like I said, Mrs. Walker too, like the school um, opposite there, what's the Woodcock Primary
Yeah.
School. At one
Yeah.
point,
Actually,
the
it's
government. was wanted to change the name of the school, and she was the principal at the time, and she absolutely refused to call the school anything else but Woodcock. Because, Father Woodcock, John Woodcock, was a priest of St. Agnes, and when he died, he left all of his funds to build a school for the children in Grantstown. And
No,
that's how
you
come the
can't
school was
change that
named
name.
Woodcock School. And the government wanted to change the name, but she would have no part of it. And she prevailed. And of
Yeah,
course, it's still Woodcock Primary School. You
yeah,
know,
you
things like that
can't
you see.
change that name.
I think it's
Yeah.
a terrible pity that they closed down the school that was named after her in Big Pond down there off Bluehill Road. That was a shame. I don't know why they closed that school down.
Well, they could
And that
rename
was
it
named
middle
for
school.
her.
Mm-hmm.
But at least she still has the Walker House in Stapleton Gardens that's named after her. The Teachers Union building that's named in her honor.
Teacher. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know that one. Jack Johnson.
Oh, Mr. Johnson, the mayor of Lewis Street. Everybody, that's what they call him. He was such a wonderful gentleman, and always had that pleasant smile. I remember Mr. Johnson used to go to Mass at St. Agnes Church every morning of the week. And when I attended at the end of Mass, he would also always have a prayer, a special prayer for everybody at church that morning. And one time he was named Father. He was one of the first persons I think was named Father of the Year in the church. But he was such a wonderful man. He worked at Government House at the time when the Duke of Windsor was here. And when the Duke and his wife were leaving here, they wanted to take him to France with them. But Mr. Johnson refused because he said he had a young family, and he recommended his nephew to go with the Duke, and he took him. And he said that his nephew and his family still live in France. Mr. Johnson, I've forgotten his first name, but he's a Johnson. Mr. Jack Johnson's nephew.
Jack,
You know.
Jack, they call him. Yeah. And
Yeah,
you
Jackie's
already
father,
touched.
Jackie, Anne, Mary, Godfrey, David. I've forgotten the other names. Pauline, I've forgotten some of the other names, but I think he had
Yeah.
about 9 children altogether. It was a big family.
So,
And that's another thing, Happy. I don't know how
okay.
the parents of our day did it, but everybody had large families. We had 7. The Coakleys had about 9 or 10. The Mortimers of the Hill, they had about 10. Mr. Johnson had at least 6 or 7. The Blydens had about 5. And, the Dorsets who lived on Lewis Street, I think they had 8 or 9. That's Patrick Ramming's mother. Her first husband was Mr. Ramming, and then she married Mr. Dorset and had a lot more children. So I think with 9 of them all told. And here again, the nurturing of the family and everybody going to church. I don't know if you've seen it, but recently when the Dorsets had a celebration, I think it was for one of their sisters, but all 9 of them, they did a beautiful video of them singing on the internet. I'm going to send it for you to
Yeah,
see and
so
hear
I
them,
didn't
you
see it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful thing that they do. And all of them sing beautifully. And of course, Ed is one of the leaders of the East Street Gospel Chapel. And of course, Patrick, he's the engineer. And
Right.
June, she's a lecturer at Dr. June Wilson. She's a lecturer at the College of the Bahamas. And Philip is an educator. And of course, about Porky's Station, eh?
Right.
Porky Dorset, Porky down
Right.
East Street. Yeah, so there were 8 or 9 of them all told. Beautiful family.
Cool.
And
And
here
they were
again, they were
on
from
what
Lewis
road?
Street and they moved on.
Okay, Lewis Street. Yeah.
Hmm
And Doctor Walker was on which street?
Dr. Walker was on Hospital Lane, not too
Hospital.
far
Okay.
from Meadow Street, not
Yeah.
just a little
Okay.
bit north of Meadow Street on
Yes.
Hospital Lane. And one of his grandchildren still lives in the house. And
Okay.
when I was there, Juliet showed me a beautiful, where they have like a pillar at the bottom, but they had a lovely wide staircase that goes straight as you go into the door. There's a beautiful staircase that heads straight up to the 2nd floor. And at the bottom
Okay.
of that staircase, he had a paved wooden pillar that came from Africa, from somewhere in Africa. It's beautiful. I think I took a picture of it when I was there. Lovely place. And Juliet said to me one time, she said, people would ask her, why are you still living over the hill? She said, living over the hill is home. And she said, that's what she said. And anybody come from over the hill anyway.
Oh, gee.
So let that sink in.
Yeah. I guess that's why me and he used to clash when we go
Yeah,
to cathedral.
that's
It's
right.
a trip now.
And you should not be ashamed of where you come from. Should
Yeah.
never be
Not
ashamed of
even.
where you come from, you know.
I
I go
agree.
back,
That's
well,
right.
you know, I go to St. Agnes, I go down every weekend. And I go to visit my brother every weekend. He still lives right next door to where we used to live, you know. He's 95
Okay.
years old and he's blind, but we visit him every weekend and sometimes during
Wow.
the week.
Yeah. That's cool. But that's plenty protection for him down there too. So
Yeah,
you already
yeah.
talked about Mabel Walker. So this one
Mm-hmm,
here is the one who traveled the world and I say put Bahamas on the map. It wasn't
mm-hmm.
Christopher Columbus, it was him. This man called Chippy.
Oh, Chippy, Chippy, Chippy. Oh, yeah. You know, they finally named the road after him, John Shipman Road. He really did
Yeah.
travel all over the
Okay.
world. They took him all over the place. And, you know, of course, Becky, you know, he said how
Yeah.
they got into dancing. One night he and Becky were at the Silver Slipper. And he said they danced together. And he said they danced so beautifully. And people applauded them. And then he said to her, you know what? People are going to pay for this. We're not dancing
Yeah.
for free anymore. And that's how they got into it.
That sound like him.
But and you know, up to very late in life, Chibi was still making drums every day. Every single day he was making drums when he down there. But he made little Julie drums for little children in school, up to the big bass drums, like the 50-gallon things. And he did that every day up almost to the time when he died.
Yeah.
Very faithful members of St. Agnes too. His family, they all his girls and Reese and Mitzi and Darnell, and they all come to St. Agnes at 10:30 mass. Very, very faithful members of St. Agnes. And Shubi used to come when we used to come at 10:30 too, and he used to sit right there with his saxophone in the congregation and play his saxophone along with the hymns. Very faithful members of St. Agnes.
Cool. Miss Hannah, Linda Russell is saying she's watching from Pembroke Pines, Florida.
Hi, Linda.
Florida.
How are you? Tell Linda I had a good meeting with her brothers,
Okay.
Adrian and her other brother, Adrian and Eric. Yeah,
Russell. Okay.
that's
They're,
great.
they're cool.
And here again, Mr. Russell was quite a musician, you know. Her father, Mr. Russell, lived right there in the corner. Her brother still lives in a house at the corner of King Street and Market Street. And Mr. Russell, he played in many, many orchestras. He led the orchestra at Paradise Island for a while, and he has very excellent music students. Some of them are still doing very well and carrying on his legacy. And Adrian, his son Adrian, played the organ at St. Francis Church for 22 or 25 years. And
Yeah.
his daughter is presently the organist at Sacred Heart Church on East Street, on East Shirley Street, near
Yeah.
St. Matthew's Church. So Mr. Russell's legacy is still going on, and he also has a daughter, Donna, who's married to Dr. Gershwin Blyden from Lewis
Right.
Street. And Donna
Okay.
is a musician. She plays at churches in Florida, also in
Yeah.
Miami, Florida.
Well,
And her
one
brother,
person.
Eric, said that whenever he goes to Florida, he goes to church a lot because of Donna,
Yeah.
because she plays at
That's
so many
right.
different churches.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So, you know,
that's
and
one.
we spread our wings all over the place.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like y'all were involved in so many different things, and maybe that's
Oh,
part of
yes.
what caused so many people to be so productive and successful in
Yes,
life.
yes,
But
yes.
my mom is saying here again that Chippy grew up at his father's house in Chippenham. Well,
Right
that's
there, right, the abandoned place on West Bay Street now. Yeah. Hmm.
well, actually, and that's where Chippenham get the name from. In case
Yeah, right there on the corner
people
there.
didn't know. Yeah. So
This
he
was
had the
said
big
way
house.
back in the land. I understand the property is supposedly owned by Z&S now. I don't know how they got a hold of it, but anyway,
Yeah, well,
that's
government
that's a,
want push
that's
government.
another long saga. You know,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
shame that the Chipmans don't have the property. You know,
Yeah. Well,
that's my
hopefully
two
someone
cents
wake
worth
up
on
for
that.
them in time. Yeah.
I hope so. I hope
Because
so.
I think
It's a
that could
shame.
be a huge, huge attraction. Yeah.
It could be.
They
You
have the
know, yeah.
land, they have the property,
Hmm.
the heritage of
Hmm.
Mr.
Yes.
Chipman
Hmm.
being responsible for building Chippenham and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
So that's a
Hmm.
story into itself, like you say.
Yeah.
So this name I don't know. Joe
True.
Billy.
I don't really know anything about Joe Billy. I heard about him. I know they used to have a Joe Billy festival somewhere over the hill, but I don't really know anything about him. I just,
Okay.
the name.
Yeah,
Hmm.
maybe my mom or somebody will chime in who might know him. Um,
Maybe, I don't know.
Mrs. Coakley is from the Southern Public Library.
Oh my goodness, Mrs. Copley, she was an angel, a living angel. So many people passed through that library with her, and she was a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful lady. I think she was a sister to Mr. Ware, who used to,
Reverend Ware?
Reverend Ware's, she's Reverend Ware's aunt, I think. His
Okay.
father
Mm-hmm.
and she were brother and sister, I think. Yeah, she was
Okay.
Lillian Ware Copley. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Cool.
Lovely
And
lady.
then the Honorable Arthurland Bodie Sr. I call him
I don't
Honorable,
know anything
Brother,
much
because
about
I
Bodie
think,
except that he was the first black man I knew to build a bank. That's what I knew about Bodie. And there was some questionable thing about him
yeah.
up here, right on the street where I lived. He actually went to prison, for
Mm-hmm.
building his house on somebody else's property.
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
right here on Seabreeze Lane. And the
Because,
Davis family still lives there.
some of my friends on Wolf Road was telling me he went prison because of the bank. But
Mhm.
you should know better than them. You can sit with them. And we know about Samila Butler and so on. But so how did mothers keep children on the straight and narrow path to education instead of taking
They
the
were busy. They
lucrative?
just kept the children busy with doing things.
Yeah,
And
but what
you
I'm
had to
saying is,
be inside the house by a certain time. You didn't just go roaming all over the place like how we see some children
yeah,
now.
when the light down, you
And
better
there were
be in the
only
house,
some places,
otherwise.
like I said, we were very closely knit family. We could each visit each other's homes. And one of my aunts lived out on Market Street, Mrs. Wilson, Lois Wilson, and the other Grace Buller lived on VZ Street. So we never
Okay.
went beyond those areas, like to go
Okay.
below, to go down to Wolf Road, and we didn't know anybody down there.
Yeah.
So we were
Okay.
sort of in an enclave, in that when it
Right.
came to that.
Right.
There were only certain
Good.
places
Good.
that you could go, and of
Mm-hmm.
course you had to be home by a certain time. No
Yeah.
ifs, ands, or buts. And then another thing on Sundays, everybody went to church. You didn't decide whether you're going to go to church or not. It was a given that you had to go to church. In fact, we went three
Mm-hmm.
times on Sunday.
Yeah.
We
Mine
went
said
at
five. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sunday school for 9:30, and then we marched over to from the school and we marched to St. Agnes Church for mass at 10:30. And
Mm-hmm.
then the afternoon, we had Sunday school was taught in the afternoon by Father Milton Cooper when I was a child. And
Mm-hmm.
what you believe happy in those days? The boys sat on one side and the girls sat on another side in church.
And church?
And
Wow.
we didn't mingle together in church. I don't know. They changed after quite a
You're
few
really
years,
old school, you
and
know.
really, really old school. I told you my age, right? So with your mama. And
Yeah.
then also when it came to taking communion, the men went up first and then the women. Would you believe that? Anyway,
Yeah.
times have changed.
Yeah. That's for
But
sure.
church was
And
good.
y'all still,
And then of
yeah.
course we went to evensong on Sunday evenings. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell you one thing, what I loved about evensong especially was to hear Father Cooper sing. He had the most beautiful tenor voice. And sometimes people would come to church just to hear Father Cooper sing. Beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
voice. So
So,
we were really, that was all, in us, going to
yeah.
church
Mm.
all day on Sunday and some, like I said, sometimes during the week too. And then we were involved in the guild at church, and I was involved with the AYP, Anglican Young People's Association. I think they call it now youth groups or something. I don't know what they call it
Yeah.
now,
Like,
Bahamas Anglican Young
eh,
People or
eh,
something like that. And then with the
yeah.
youth group,
I mean,
the
yeah.
AYPA,
AYM.
we used to have
AYMA.
we
Something
used
like
to
that.
have interchurch debates and all like that. I was on debating team. Vinky Bosquick and I were the debating team, the AYPA debating team for
Mm-hmm.
St. Agnes. And we were coached by Father Father Willie Thompson.
Right.
And
My
it was
godfather.
so much
Mm-hmm.
fun going from church to church and we saw big audiences, for those debates. That was great.
Yeah.
People
Young
don't do
man
things like that.
competition.
Have you ever hear about anybody doing debates? The last
Yeah,
time
no,
I heard of
yeah,
any
they had
debates was
debate
when
in
I was
school all
was a,
day.
a student at COB when the the police force they used to have
Mm-hmm.
debates in various departments. They used to debate
Mm-hmm.
against each other, and they used to have those debates down in the auditorium at COB at the time. But I don't know if they do that sort of thing now.
Staple over the hill, the Palm Tree restaurant.
Oh my God, the palm tree, the best hamburgers in the world, the
Mm-hmm.
best, and don't talk about the custard cream, the coconut cream pie. And oh my God, and the fritters, everything was so good. And they had a jukebox in there, just very small
Mm-hmm.
space. But when
Yeah.
you go into the palm tree to get your food, and if you have to wait, you put 25 cents in the jukebox, and you could dance in a little, must be about 8 by 10 area while you wait for your food.
It ain't that big. I don't even think it's that
No,
big. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
nothing like that now. But
Yeah.
Russell, Russell Carroll, Mr. Russell's nephew. He started a new place. I think it's right there on Blue Hill Road, a little bit below St. Agnes. I couldn't think they called it New Palm Tree. And he sells. I think it's still open.
Oh yeah. On the other
The
side,
New Palm
Blue
Tree.
Hill.
So
Yeah,
they sell stuff there. So I
yeah,
haven't patronized them much, but I do know that they sell the same type of food.
yeah.
I think
So
it's
the
still
people,
in operation.
yeah,
But
Linda
that
Russell
was a
is
good
saying,
spot, the palm tree.
yeah, Linda is saying again that thank you for
And
the
now with
recognition.
the building is there rotting and it's all overgrown with weeds and vines all over it. Everything is just gone.
Well, then the next
It's a
generation
shame.
can get
Yeah,
the funds to be able
whatever.
to do some with it. Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's a crying
So
shame.
Sydney's shoe repair.
Oh, Sydney. Sydney and his brother, Thaddeus, started out together as shoemakers on East Street. Just on the corner of East Street and Anderson Street, coming down the hill from Mortimer's Candy Kitchen. They started there.
Okay.
And then they split up, and Sydney opened the place on Market Street, and Thaddeus opened a place on the corner of East Street and Wolf Road. The Wilson building, that two-story brown building, that's Thaddeus's building there.
Okay.
And Sydney kept things going on Market Street. Still, the shop is
Yeah.
still going. His son is still operating it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Well,
seen
yeah.
Hadassah Delaveau's book Over the Hill, the Other Side?
No, no,
She
I'm
wrote
not
a
familiar with it.
very nice book that she wrote. And what she's done in that, she's written little short stories about people over the hill. She wrote about Sydney Shoe Shop. She also wrote about Mr. Archer, Lyra's father, the tailor,
Right. Yeah.
and some other people. And she also has me in there. And other people who have businesses over the hill. They're just very short stories that she's written. It's very well done. Little short stories about different people and things that are happening over the hill.
Yeah. So your friend Gino is saying Manfield is just
Uh-huh.
and Val's daughter, my cousin them. Love the
Gina, tell her
palm
hello.
tree. Used to sneak there, say sneak, on lunch for
Hmm.
those burgers.
That's right.
Yeah. The
The
only
best
thing though,
burgers.
you had to wait nights, right? And about the
Oh yeah,
lunchtime,
you
you
had to
just
raise
wasn't
one
full
hand
of
to bake
anything.
because many people, everybody wanted the hamburgers, wanted food from the palm tree.
Mm-hmm.
Their fritters
Mm-hmm.
were good too.
Oh yeah. We used to come
Very
off
good.
off of common ground, and then
Hmm.
you used to put in
And
your
then
little box
another
and
place
play
we,
in and
where
out
we
too,
used
and
to
then
go for
come
lunch.
back for it.
When I was in a Western Junior School, we used to go to the Purity Bakery for slam bam sandwiches,
Mm-hmm.
sausage and rolls. That's
Yeah.
where the
So
slam
you
bam
mentioned
sandwiches came from.
Western
Hmm.
Junior. So you had Western Junior, Western Senior, Eastern Junior,
Hmm.
and Eastern Senior,
And Southern
right?
Junior and Southern Senior too.
And Southern Junior and Southern Senior. Wow.
Hmm.
So you're always protected by schools on each
Yeah, they were good
direction.
schools, very good schools. When I was a
Mm-hmm.
junior, when I was a Western Junior School, Timothy Gibson was the headmaster.
Okay. The national anthem.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some people don't
Mm-hmm.
realize it, and even in my church, that when I was a little girl, young girl, we had a junior choir way back then, and Mr. Gibson used to direct the junior choir. His daughter Faye, Lee's mother,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in that choir. My sister-in-law Dolores Hanna, and Freddie and Turnquest and her sister
Okay.
Beverly Ford. They were all in the junior
Bobby.
choir
Yeah.
as Agnes. And
Yeah.
I remember Faye telling me at one time, so they didn't sing loud, they sang hard. And I always wondered, I said, why is this man directing the choir with this little stick? They had a little baton that he used
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
direct the choir with. And they used to sit right down at the front of the church, just in front of the pulpit. And then
Mm-hmm.
later on, Mr. Hyler came along, Kenneth Hyler, you would know Mr. Hyler from Nassau
Mm-hmm.
Street. And
Yep.
revitalized the junior choir. And
Mm-hmm.
then Miss Hutchison. And now we have
Yeah.
Janet Dorset, who is in charge of the junior choir now, of the children's
Okay.
choir now.
The
And
Capitol
Caroline
Theater.
Drill is in charge of the junior choir. The Theater was the place to go, especially on the weekends. That was
Mm.
part of our treat too. After you done all the chores and everything, you go to the movies in the afternoon. The Capitol or the cinema. But we used to go to the cinema first before the Capitol was built. Cinema was at the corner of East Street and Lewis Street. It's a
Mm-hmm.
parking lot now for the Brethren Church. But yeah, the Capitol Theater was the place to go.
Yeah. And Keith's
And we
Chicken.
used to look forward to going on Saturdays to watch because they used to play these serials, and they got you roped in, but you had to go to the following week to see what would happen again.
Then, right.
So they say come back next week or whatever. So you had to keep going to see these serials to see how the story would end. That's how they got us in there. But it was
And then
fun.
you
It
used to
was
have the
fun.
Pepsi Cola cap,
Yeah.
Coca-Cola cap
hmm
stuff shows and stuff like that. So
hmm
Gina saying, I often wonder what happened to the typing school. I think it was
Mrs.
run.
Mortimer had a typing school on Meeting Street. That was Dr. Granville. Oh, no, what's
Bain.
Granville's surname? Granville Bain's mother.
Bain.
Right there on East Street, on the top of near where Bethel Baptist Church is now. Where Bethel Baptist parking lot is now on the eastern side. That's where the Mortimer house was. And she was the sister of Ulrich Mortimer, who owned the Candy Kitchen.
Yeah,
And her
yeah.
mother, Mrs. Mortimer, lived there with her. But that was the first typing school that I knew about in the Bahamas. This was
Yeah.
Mortimer. And another thing about her, when they were doing those petitions for the women's suffrage movement, she was the one who typed up all the letters and the petitions and things for Mrs. Ingram and her group.
Yeah,
So
Bernadette
she was
Gardner
very
saying
politically involved too.
best burgers and fritters ever.
Oh
The
yeah,
best that she made in the palm tree.
Comfort is good boy.
Yeah, cool. So Yellow Boy, Cat and Fiddler, and the Banana Boat.
Well, okay,
Banana Boat was
I
their
patronized
original
all of them
Banana
when I was a
Buddy.
young woman. When I was a young woman, I patronized all of them and all the little nightclubs and things. The Yellow Bird on Wolf Road. Did your family own that property down there?
Yeah, somehow
Yeah,
I
I
think part of
remember
it.
as a
Somehow,
little
yeah.
as a little girl, I went to a party down there, and I remember riding around there in a horse and carriage. The first time I ever rode in a horse and carriage when it was just the gardens at the time owned by your family. And I mentioned that to Agatha Strawn one day. And I said, I remember going to a party. She said, that was your party. I must have been about 3 or 4.
Oh,
I didn't know whose party it was, but I remember riding around in there on a horse and carriage.
yeah.
But that was a nice
Probably
place. And
answer.
they called it turn into the Lemon Tree. Yeah, the Lemon
Um,
Tree Club. That eventually became the Lemon Tree Club. I think, what was the name of the man who
maybe.
used to sing there?
And now it's the car place
That's
there.
what Dicey and those have
Yeah.
their place now. Allardyce
Okay.
Scott has her business, and her daughter has their business there.
Yeah,
On that
something like
same
that.
site. And the lady who sells flags, Beyond Flags, her
Right.
business is also in that property where your people own that property. And then of course
So
the banana boat. And you know what was nice when we were young? They used to have matinee dances on holidays and Saturday afternoons for children at the Cat and Fiddle and also at the Silver Slipper on East Street. And guess what? Live bands, live bands, no records, live bands. And then there was Penis Taylor's Club, the Drum Beat, which is on Fleming Street and
right.
Market Street.
Yeah.
All of those places. And we had so many nightclubs on
30s.
Bay Street and all over the place. And Fox Hill, all of these little nooks and crannies up here in Fox Hill. I've been to all of those little joints. And they all had live bands. They all have live, beautiful, talented musicians. And now we've
Yeah.
come to the point in the Bahamas where our musicians can't make a living, can't make an honest living in the Bahamas. Most of them cannot make a living. Some of them have had to go abroad to,
Yeah.
to earn a living as musicians. And, they turn to other fields.
Right. Right. So what do we
And
have to do? Do to these places or to bring things back to.
I think one of the
You don't
worst
want to
things
go
that ever
backwards,
happened
but you want to be able to
was
build people up.
we have really regressed when it comes to our culture and music and dance and the like. And it upsets me when I hear people, the prime minister and other people talking nonsense. I don't care what they think about me, talking nonsense about bringing people in here to teach us culture. We don't need anyone to come in here to teach us how to dance or to play music. We have brilliant
Right.
musicians and dancers right here in the Bahamas and singers and everything. They just need to support what we have, support
Right.
the people
Right.
we have. Why don't they support the National Dance School, the National Youth Choir, the National
Yeah.
Youth Orchestra, and we have other schools like what's his name, the fellow who used to dance with the New Breed Dance, Lawrence Carroll's Academy, um, Mr. Fox, who has a music academy. People don't hear about them, but they're doing marvelous work. And these are all people who worked well-trained people who worked all over the world came back and are doing things to the Bahamas, but they're not appreciated by our leaders. And we do
Right.
not need anyone to come in here to teach us how to dance and play music.
Yeah, but I think
That's
it,
my 2 cents on
I
that.
think it's yeah. I think it's us though that we have to hold them accountable and so forth. So my mom is saying here that the Club Coconut Palm, which became the
Hmm.
Yellow Bird, Bob
Yeah,
Dylan
yellow
grew
bird.
up,
The yellow bird. Yeah,
ran
as I said,
the
lemon
club,
tree.
and
Mhm.
Peanuts Taylor ran the Yellow Bird, but Daddy owned the property. Okay, so
Yeah,
Pop
right. I
Up,
remember that.
you might know
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
name Pop Up, Edward
Yeah.
Elliott, yeah, contractor,
Hmm.
and so
Hmm.
forth. So
Peanut
um,
Taylor had a wonderful band in his place. He had a wonderful band at that place down there when they were on Market Street and Fleming Street. I used to go down there a lot and I used to sit up front. I just love to hear the music.
so
Beautiful.
basically what they're saying then is that I lost my bit. That over the hill had so many different dimensions that
Hmm.
people were
Hmm.
occupied time and it built people
Hmm.
so that they could go ahead
Hmm.
and want
Hmm.
to improve their lives.
Hmm.
And maybe that's what we
Yes.
need to get back to, having these communities or these villages and the like. So what do we need to do to get that?
I think one of the worst things that we ever did was allow these ships when they come into the port to have their own entertainment on shore. Because years gone by, we had like five, six, seven, eight clubs, nightclubs on Bay Street with live music that people, the tourists could go to. But there's none of that anymore. And like I say, we don't support our own. I don't know how we're going to get over that. But there are some people who are trying, like, for instance, my friend Naomi Taylor and her husband, Clinton Crawford. They
Yeah,
have a good
yeah.
thing going at their Spotlight 242 lounge out in Adelaide. And they are encouraging other musicians to come and play down there. Um, and they also encourage young musicians. And I saw where this young lady, Selah Poitier, she's also now, she has a band that's playing full time at some place out east, I think. But we have wonderful bands. We got the Spank Band. We got all sorts of bands around here. Fred Ferguson
Yeah,
has a new group called the Montague Four or something. I think it's called the Montague Four. Of course, he lives abroad and he comes back and
right,
forth because he couldn't
right.
make a living here. It's a shame. And we have so many wonderful musicians who are doing so well, and academically and everything. But a lot of them, unfortunately, are staying abroad. Then we have this
Right,
wonderful young trumpet player Gifton, who's
right.
mentored by Mr. Diaghilev, by Adrian Diaghilev.
Adrian Diaghilev.
We had a wonderful event at the UNESCO Jazz Day. Your mom
Yeah,
was there. You were there, and you saw
yeah,
what
I
that
was
was
there.
all about, right? Wasn't that wonderful? You see all the
Awesome.
talent that we have, and the youngsters in the bands and everything.
Yeah, and
What
I
are we
told you,
going to do? You know?
Adrian has to have one with just the young people because he mentors like at least
Yes,
three or
yes.
four that I know about. One, my
Mhm,
cousin, who's
mhm.
self-taught, and then Adrian took him up
Yes, a lot of
to
them are
learn more.
self-taught.
Yeah,
You know. We
yeah,
have some brilliant young people here, but they need to have an outlet to for their craft and to,
right.
to be able to make a living from it.
But you
I don't know.
mentioned
I
that
don't know what the
in
reason is.
when you were in school, you all had craft as part to teach trades, and when I was in high
Yeah,
school,
in West in the
we
government
had
schools, they taught woodwork and you had home cookery and all that, sewing and all that sort of thing. We had that in the schools. I don't know if
yeah.
they probably still do it now. I think
Well,
I'm not sure, but I don't know.
we had it when I went to QC, and I think they
Mhm.
stopped it
They did.
after a while. Yeah, but you were
Another
saying
thing
that
I'm
there's go ahead.
mhm.
You go
Another
ahead.
thing I'm happy to hear that the Ministry of Education is now changing the history curriculum for our schools.
Yeah.
Dr.
Curry.
Christopher is working on, Curry is working, and some others are working on that. Patty Glinton McCullis, I think, is also on that team, to come up with
Yeah.
a new curriculum for all of the schools. And the minister says that should be coming on stream soon, hopefully in September, I think.
Yeah.
But it's essential that we know our history from beginning to end, not just from 73 or whenever, but going way back and coming right up to the present. And it should be mandatory at all levels. You go into other countries. When I went to school in Canada, I had to learn Canadian history.
Yeah.
Wherever you
Almost
go, you learn
everybody
the
is
history of the country.
speaking French almost. So
Yeah, but we,
Dr.
we have to
Curry
do
that
better in that regard.
was on the show,
Mhm.
and I know he did a lot of groundwork prior to it, but we like to try
Oh,
and
yes.
take a
Hmm.
little ownership and say we gave him the swift kick to get the
Yeah.
rest of the energy to go and make
I'm
it
sure he's going to
happen.
do an excellent job.
Yes,
He's
he's
good.
doing very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gina is saying that, does anyone remember the lady that taught piano lessons on Infant View
Gloria
Road?
Barrett.
Gloria Barrett.
Gloria Barrett, that's Greg Barrett's mother. She became Lockhart,
Okay.
Gail Lockhart's mother. She's Meta
Oh,
Davis
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Cumberbatch's daughter
Yeah.
and Mrs. Zoe
Right.
Maynard's, Lady Maynard's sister. She taught music first on Louis Street. She used to live on Louis Street, she and Greg, before she married Mr. Lockhart. And then she moved to the Aurora Hall up there at the top of Charlotte Street by the steps. And that's where she taught music for many years, right there. Gloria Barrett.
Yeah, you're welcome.
She was
So,
also a poet and a playwright. Lovely
now, Miss
lady.
Hannah, I know I could keep you going all night calling
So what
names
else?
and
How
stuff.
long we been
But if
talking for Happy?
huh? That's about an hour.
How long we been talking?
About an hour. Yeah. And you
I
was
thought
talking about
I
that.
thought we were gonna run out of things to say.
Yeah, I know. They all always say that until I get you all started, and then you all just lose track of time and so forth. But and so, but it's great. But the point is that I think we need to get to the point where we start building, and we have plenty over the hills now. We had a second over the hill with going over the Blue Hill
Yes.
Hill Road, and now we have City 2000, and we also have the Family Islands, and
That's
also the
right.
internet is over the hill now. So
Right, yeah.
we need to
You
find
know,
ways to
the people at
build all these
Carmichael
things
Road don't have
again.
to come uptown for anything.
Uh,
Carmichael is a city all by itself.
yeah, you can
They
get
have
everything
everything
down there.
down there.
Only thing they need is a hospital, and they straight.
Yes, yes, yes.
Cool.
hmm
Miss Anna, I want to thank you for joining me. And if there's anything you want to say to the public out there, or what we might have
No,
missed out, that you, I know
it
you.
was my pleasure to be here, Happy. And I just want us to continue to support our own and push for our leaders to appreciate what we have here and support our creatives.
Yes.
And please, for
And
God's sake, let's clean up the Bahamas. My friend Concola, he's on a mission about
yeah,
cleaning up this place. And we have a serious, serious problem with derelict vehicles and garbage all over the place. So let's try to keep the Bahamas clean and pristine. Okay?
right. Yeah, he needs to
Okay.
have more
Thank you so
children so
much,
that they
Happy.
could do
It's a
it.
pleasure to be here.
Yeah, but I need to say this to it. I forgot to mention that you have a stellar book. I think the book is called Pictorial History and
Oh,
Memories
Pictorial History
of
and Memories of Nassau is over the hill.
Nassau
Well,
over the
it's
hill.
out of print now, but they can also watch the Over the Hill documentary, which is on YouTube. Nassau's Over the
Okay,
Hill. There's some good
Nassau over the hill.
information from them, and that tells you
Yeah,
all about Over the Hill. I think I interviewed 15 or 16 people for that venture, but it's
nice.
open to the public on YouTube or on Facebook. Nassau's Over the Hill and documentary movie on Facebook. You
Right.
can see it there.
Well, thank you kindly. I rode to 50 in 5 minutes to tell you how we
Yes,
really
yes,
build
yes.
this nation from strength to strength. A lot of names there.
I hope
Hopefully,
so.
guys, you go out there and Google some of these names that we call, get some more detail, or you can even contact Miss
Right.
Hannah. She's on Facebook
Okay. I'll be
every
happy to help
day,
anybody who
3 or
calls.
4 times a day. So, and then they have a network. So you might
Yes.
connect her, but there's a network of people who can be responding to you, and you get all kind of good information, history,
Okay. No
knowledge,
problem.
stuff. Thank you kindly, everybody in social media. Thank you, everybody up there in Canada and Florida and Ghana and where else I saw today. Yeah, all of y'all. London.
Okay.
Madam
Okay.
Producer, thank you. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Enjoyed the show? Then subscribe to us for more educational and inspirational content. Ring the bell so you never miss a show. Let's change the narrative, 242.